Welcome to Discoveries from OC Playwrights Alliance. For over 20 years, OCPA's mission has been to support and promote the development of new plays for the stage by Orange County writers. In Discoveries, we produce readings of new works using local acting and directing talent, so writers can experience their work aloud and see how it plays for an audience. To learn more about OC Playwrights Alliance, visit ocplaywrights.org. In this edition of Discoveries, we present Pete and Steve, a one-act play by Dana Hammer, directed by Wade Williamson, featuring Nathan Brewer, Erika Bronwell, Miguel Cardenas, Melisa Cole, DJ Grip, Jeff Lowe, and Robin Walton.
Scene 1. Pete, a cranky old man, sits in his cabin sewing up a pair of pants. The cabin is rustic. Pete is a homesteader survivalist, and it shows in his choice of clothing and decor. He pricks himself with the needle and winces. It hurts. He stands, setting the pants aside. He needs to stretch. As he stretches, there's a strange sound coming from off stage. He looks at his joints. Did his joints make that sound? The sound happens again, louder this time, and it's followed by a loud guttural hollering. Pete is not messing around. He gets his shotgun and he opens the door and he peeks outside.
What the?
Pete returns, holding a small feral boy by the arm. The boy is wearing a weird loincloth type garment made from sticks and leaves and moss and nothing else. He is dirty and terrified.
What the hell you think you're doing teasing a boar like that? You could have got yourself killed.
Pete turns from the boy and goes off stage again. We hear a loud gunshot. Pete comes back on stage.
Took care of that now. Who the hell are you and why are you dressed like that?
The boy says nothing, just stands there frightened.
Well, ain't you gonna talk? Who are you? Where are your parents?
The boy scratches at his head.
Are you deaf?
The boy
You
scratches.
speak English?
He scratches more violently.
What, you got lice or something?
The boy sits down and scratches himself like a dog.
Well, what the hell?
The boy grunts and makes hand gestures.
What are you trying to say to me?
He grunts some more, getting angry now.
Kid, I got no idea what you're on about. You wait here. Let me go see if I can find your parents.
Pete goes off stage.
Oh. Hey, hello? Anybody out there? I got your kid. Hello? Well, I don't know what's going on here, but you can stay here till your folks come for you.
Pete peers closely at the boy.
Though, from the looks of you, your parents ain't exactly involved.
Pete reaches a hand to the boy who flinches and crawls away.
Shit, I ain't gonna hurt you, kid. Jesus.
The boy covering his head protectively.
Are you one of them feral kids you hear about? You know, I saw this special on TV once about feral kids. Goddamn depressing it was. One of the best things about not having a TV is I don't got to deal with all that shit.
The boy senses that he is safe and he has uncovered his head. He watches Pete carefully.
Well, regardless, you ain't been taken care of. Any fool can see that. Now, if I was a sane man, I'd drive you into town and take you to the police and let them take care of it. But let's just say I ain't what's known in these parts as a sane man, at least not around here. It takes a certain kind of crazy to live out here the way I do. No electricity, no health insurance, no job, no other people. But it's what I like. And judging from the way you look, it's what you like too. Or what you used to anyway.
Pete coughs and clutches at his throat.
So sorry, I ain't said more than 2 words in months. My voice box is a little rusty.
The boy sees Pete's gun and tries to grab for it, curious. Pete snatches it away.
Oh, no way, kid. Not till I figure you out.
The boy whines and makes an angry grunt.
Well, look, I understand your perspective. I mean, it's your right as an American citizen to have access to firearms. But this here's my firearm. It's my personal property, and I don't tend to hand it over to some kid who can't even talk and looks like he just crawled out of a junkyard.
Pete puts the gun back on the rack, out of the boy's reach.
Now, as I was saying, the government is a tyrannical, oppressive system run by idiots and nincompoops. Well, I would never take a boy such as yourself and let him get caught up in a system like that. No, sir. I hate to think what had happened to you, but if you're going to stay here, there's some rules. First, you got to wear clothes. This ain't no fucking Jungle Book.
Pete stops and frowns.
I guess I ain't supposed to say fucking around kids, right? Sorry about that. This ain't the Jungle Book. You got to wear clothes. Now, I don't have nothing in your size. We'll make do. Second, you got to take a bath. Jesus, you smell like 8 kinds of death. I tell you what, you probably got lice and wood ticks and who knows what else. So, bath. And finally, you got to work. This ain't no fancy resort in Cancun. You got to pull your weight. All right? I'm going to take that as a yes. You know, I like you, kid. Most people can't ever shut up, but not you. Now, bath.
Pete opens a cupboard and retrieves a large tub. He goes off stage and returns with another bucket of water.
We get our water from the well out back. I'll show you where it is later and how to use it and all of that.
Pete
All
fills
right.
the tub with water.
Get on in.
The boy looks at the tub quizzically. He approaches it slowly. He dips his hands in and drinks the water.
No, not like that. Get in.
The boy continues to drink.
Boy, I said get in the tub. You got to get some of this filth off if you're sleeping in my house.
The boy continues to drink. Pete picks the boy up and sets him in the tub. The boy freaks out. He screams and scrambles out of the tub and he runs around wet and panicked.
Hey, settle down. It's just water, for God's sake.
Pete chases the boy and tackles him.
See, the nice thing about not having neighbors, can't see nobody see me tackling a half-naked boy like this and think I'm some kind of creep.
Pete has the boy now. He picks him up and he sets him in the tub again. The boy tries to get out, but Pete is ready for this and he holds him inside, grabs a wash rag, uses it to wipe the boy's face while the boy struggles.
Damn it, hold still. This ain't gonna hurt.
He pours water over the boy's head. The boy ducks in the tub and comes back up. He spits water into Pete's face. Pete, shocked, wipes the water away while the boy leaps out of the water and runs off stage and Pete gets to his feet.
I'm too old for this shit.
He chases the boy off stage.
Right now.
Lights dim. Scene 2. Lights up. It's later that day. The boy is wearing one of Pete's old shirts. It falls down to his shins. However, he is clean now and calm. He's seated at the table. Pete is pulling food out of the larder. He selects a large smoked salmon or other fish. He cuts pieces off and puts them on 2 plates.
I don't know what you've been eating. Normally, I assume a kid your age been eating at McDonald's. Fish sticks and stuff like that. But you ain't no normal kid, are you? No, you ain't. You look like you ain't been fed in weeks. Well, anyway, we got no McDonald's here, so you'll eat what we got.
Pete adds a hunk of bread. He sets down the fish and bread on the table along with a jar of homemade jam. He ladles water into the jam jar and sets it down in front of the boy.
I eat what I catch, what I kill, and what I grow, and what I find. And that's the way it should be. A man shouldn't have to rely on grocery stores and restaurants to get food. You understand that? Don't you, boy?
The boy swings his feet back and forth. He squirms in the chair. He is obviously not used to sitting in chairs.
I don't like calling you boy. Makes me feel like some racist slave holder. What should I call you?
The boy gets out of his chair and examines it, running his hands over the chair.
You know, when I was your age, I had a buddy. His name was Steve. Well, we used to play together all the time. You know, now that you're not covered in mud and sticks, you kind of look like him. I'll call you Steve. You okay with that?
Steve has no interest in Pete's speech. He continues to examine the chair.
Will you sit down and eat, Steve? You're making me nervous.
Steve looks up at Pete quizzically, and Pete sits in his own chair, demonstrating how he wants Steve to do. Steve gets it. He sits down. The food is on the table.
Dig in. Don't be shy.
Pete opens the jam jar and spoons some jam onto his bread. Steve watches him closely, and then he copies Pete, adding some jam to his own bread as well. Pete takes a bite of his bread. Steve copies Pete, cautious. Then Steve realizes it is freaking delicious, and he wolfs down the bread and the jam in a very few bites.
Whoa, there, Steve, you're gonna choke.
Steve grabs the jam jar and thrusts his hand inside. He dips in and begins shoveling handfuls into his mouth.
Jesus, kid, it's just jam.
It's not just jam to Steve. It is the most delicious thing he's ever eaten. He moans and he slurps it off his fingers.
Christ almighty.
Steve has finished the jam, licks the jar, seeking more. Pete snatches it away.
Hey, well, why don't you try the fish, Steve? It's pretty good too, you know.
Pete picks up the bit of fish and eats, demonstrating. Steve puts the entire piece of fish in his mouth and swallows it. He is not impressed.
All right, then.
Pete clears the table as he talks.
Well, your parents ain't come looking for you yet, and if you got any. Honestly, if they didn't come, I don't know that I'd give you back to them. No offense, but they're doing a pretty shitty job if they exist at all. I'm betting you ain't got no parents. All right, well, it's time to go to sleep. I'm an old man. I don't stay up late partying like some folks. When it's dark, we sleep. When it's light, we get up. That's how it works here.
Pete sees what Steve is doing.
Will you stop with the chair? You ain't seen a chair before?
Steve is alarmed by Pete's tone and stops what he's doing.
All right, so I ain't used to having company, so I only got one bed. Now, I'd offer it to you, but I'm an old man. I can't sleep on the floor like when I was young, but you can sleep. You're all bendy and shit, and it won't hurt you to sleep on the floor.
Pete opens the cupboard and retrieves some blankets.
A good thing in a wintertime would be there no extra blankets. You can use these.
Pete makes a bed on the floor with the blankets.
You can sleep there for now.
Steve stares at the blankets, confused.
Oh, for Christ's sakes. You ain't used blankets before either, have you? Well, where the hell do you sleep at night? Well, don't think that bothers me none. I don't feel sorry for you. I mean, lots of kids got it real bad. I can't feel sorry for all of them. What's it to me if a tiny little guy you has to sleep outside with no parents and no blankets, no...
Pete breaks off, stifling tears. He's embarrassed by his display of emotion and immediately recovers himself.
Jesus, all right. You gotta go to sleep. Sleep.
Pete closes his eyes and folds his hand under his cheek, miming sleep. Steve understands and lays his head on top of the blankets.
Oh, no, not like that.
Pete takes the top blanket and covers the boy up, tucking him in gently.
All right, now, I'm going to bed. I sleep in there.
Pete points off stage and Steve blinks.
Good night.
Pete goes off stage. A moment later, Pete comes back carrying a pillow.
I guess you'll be needing a pillow. I only got the one, so I guess you'll be using mine.
Pete gently lifts Steve's head and places the pillow underneath it. He stands gruff and grumpy.
Fine. Good night.
Pete exits. Lights out. Scene 3. Pete and Steve stand on the edge of the river. They are surrounded by trees and nature. Pete holds a fishing pole and tackle box. Steve, still wearing the oversized t-shirt, but now with gigantic boots on, stands beside him.
Now this here is called fishing. We use this pole to catch fish, like this.
Pete demonstrates. Steve watches, attentive. Pete puts the worm on a hook, showing Steve what he's doing.
Here, fish is like these little guys. So we're gonna use it as bait.
Pete casts his line into the water.
Now, we wait.
Steve watches the water intensely. He crouches on the ground low, like a predator.
What you doing there, Steve?
Steve lays on his stomach, peering into the water closely.
Hey, don't scare the fish away.
Steve ignores Pete, continuing to stare. Suddenly, he snatches a fish out of the water.
Well, I'll be damned. Nice work, kid.
Steve bangs the fish on the ground to knock it out. He brings the fish to his mouth and tears into it. Pete watches, shocked and a little uncomfortable.
Hey, Steve.
Steve is growling, gnawing the fish like a wild animal.
Hey, Steve.
Steve continues to eat.
Steve.
Steve stops eating. His face slumps. He realizes his mistake and he's ashamed of himself. He extends the mutilated fish corpse to Pete, offering to share.
Oh, no, no, thanks. You go ahead, I guess.
A huge Bigfoot paw reaches on stage towards Steve. It is quickly snatched back. There was a low grumble from off stage. Steve drops the fish. He looks around, excited. He calls out. The sounds he makes are not human language, but it's understood that he's calling out for someone, looking for someone.
Hey, what's the matter, Steve? What's going on?
Steve frantically looks around, running this way and that, calling out loudly in his strange tongue. Pete chases the boy and finally catches him. He holds Steve tightly until he calms down. Steve sits on the ground and cries. Pete sits down next to him.
Shit, kid, I ain't no good at this. My wife used to tell me I had the empathy of an ice cube. God rest her soul. So here's the deal. I ain't going to be able to comfort you like your mama. I ain't going to be able to teach you like a teacher. You're going to get no lessons from the periodic table or Jesus or the opera from me. But here's what I can do. I can give you protection. I can teach you a little bit about survival, and I can leave you the hell alone when you need to cry it out. That sound good?
Steve sniffs. If he understands what Pete is saying, he doesn't let on.
Take that as a yes. So you go on and cry as much as you need to. And when you're done, you can catch some fish and go on home.
Pete grabs his fishing pole and resumes fishing. Steve hugs his knees and rocks back and forth. It takes a few moments, but Steve regains his composure and stands next to Pete. Pete puts his arm around Steve. They fish in silence. Lights fade. Scene 4. Pete and Steve sit in front of a campfire. It is dark, lit only by the firelight, but well lit enough that we can see Pete and Steve. Fish roast on the spit over the flames. Pete is drinking clear liquid from a mason jar. He is drunk. He slurs slightly as he talks and waves his arms around a lot. Steve also has a mason jar, but his is full of jam. He happily crams fistfuls of jam into his mouth while Pete talks.
You know, it's the 5th day of the 5th lunar month. You don't know that has any special meaning. Of course you did. Sorry about that. Anyway, that's when the Chinese have their dragon boat festival. My wife was Chinese, so I know all about it. And I'm guessing you ain't never been to one of those festivals. Anyway, on the day of the dragon boat festival, according to legend, you can make up a batch of goo poison. You know what that is.
Pete elbows Steve as a friendly, just kidding kind of way, but it's a little too hard because he's drunk. Steve nearly falls over.
Oh, yeah, just joshing. You don't know shit about shit. I don't mean that as an insult, by the way. It ain't your fault. And in fact, I think you're a smart little feller. You just ain't never been taught nothing. So you don't know about goo poison. Anyway, to make goo poison, you take a bunch of venomous creatures, you put them in a jar, and you make them fight it to the death. And when only one of them is left, That creature has all the power of the creatures that it has destroyed.
Pete has been gesturing wildly, sloshes some of the alcohol onto the ground.
Fuck.
He looks at Steve apologetically.
Oh, I apologize for my foul use of language, Steve. Truth is, I ain't been around a kid in near 10 years. What was I saying before this? Oh, yeah. Goo poison. I guess what I was getting at is people do some stupid shit to gain power over other people. You know what I'm saying, Steve? Like, you take these animals that didn't do nothing to you and you make them fight to the death like it's the goddamn Hunger Games. And for what? Just so you can have poison to kill other people with? And it's not just that, Steve. Goo poison is small potatoes. It's a lot of other stuff, too.
Steve's jar is empty. He nudges Pete with the empty jar, indicating he'd like some more.
Oh, Jesus, kid, you keep eating any more of that jam, you're going to puke. And I ain't cleaning that shit up. You hear me?
Steve nudges him again, insistent.
All right.
Pete opens another jar and hands it to Steve, who devours it.
Back before I left civilization and came to live all the way out here, there were these guys, criminals. My wife, she used to help criminals turn their lives around when they got out of prison. It was her job. And she was good at it too. But there was this one guy. She took a liking to him, said he had potential, that he was a genius even. And she convinced him that he could leave the gang he'd been running with and that he could start over someplace new and that it'd all be some damn fairy tale with a happy ending. My wife didn't think about goo poison. She didn't think about things like that. The links people will go to gain and maintain power.
Pete takes a long drink from his jar. Steve leans against Pete, resting his head on the man.
They killed her, Steve. Those gangbangers killed her. That sorry son of a bitch, she was trying to shot him dead in my wife's car. It was a great car, by the way. Classic 57 Chevy Impala. I restored it myself. Gave it to her for a wedding present. I don't know, Steve. The world is a shit place, and I don't belong in it at all. Never have. So once my wife got killed, there was nothing keeping me tied to it. So I left.
Pete notices Steve is leaning against him and he puts his arm around the boy.
You know, my wife always wanted kids. Well, I didn't. Always thought I'd be a shit father. Probably would have been too. Still, I wonder what she'd think about all this. Me taking in a small feral boy from the woods. You know what, Steve? I think she'd approve. Yeah, yes, indeed.
Pete stands, he's wobbly on his feet. He removes the fish from the spit and puts them in the bucket.
All right, well, we got to get these fish inside and go to bed. It's too late for this old man. In fact, I haven't been staying up this late for years. Your youthful energy must be rubbing off on me.
Steve helps Pete move off stage.
Oh, you're a good boy, Steve. Real good boy.
Lights fade. Scene 5. It is morning and Pete and Steve are standing outside a small apiary. Pete is in a beekeeper suit. Steve is standing back away from the bees.
Now, you stay back there, you hear? If I had an extra suit, I'd give it to you, but I don't. So you just stay back.
There's a loud buzzing coming from the apiary. The bees are busy. Steve uses a smoker to put the bees to sleep.
This makes the bees all sleepy. That way, it's safer.
Steve inches closer, curious to see what is happening. Pete doesn't.
Now we can lift the lid.
Pete lifts the lid and removes the frame that contains the honeycomb. Using a butter knife, he dislodges the honeycomb. Proud of his prize, he turns around to find Steve standing right behind him. Pete jumps, startled. Pete's startled yelp startles Steve, and he jumps too. Steve backs away and trips and falls. He lands on his butt using his hands to cushion his fall. He screams in pain.
Oh, it's just fine, just a little fall. Get up, you baby.
Steve holds out his hand and wails. Pete examines the hand.
Oh, yeah, you must have fallen on a bee. He didn't like it much. That's a nasty sting. Let's go inside and we'll get the stinger out. Come on.
However, Steve can't come. He's clutching his chest, pawing at his throat. He's having trouble breathing.
Shit, Steve, are you allergic to bees?
Of course, Steve doesn't answer. He holds up his hand and looks at it. He's panicking.
All right. It's going to be all right. We just need to get you into town. There's doctors who can help. We'll fire up the truck and get you in town.
Pete picks up Steve and carries him off stage, leaving the honey behind. The stage is empty for a few beats. 3 big feet slowly emerge. Bigfoot 1 peers at the apiary, confused, goes near it, sees a few bees and backs away. Bigfoot 3 finds the abandoned honeycomb and lifts it up to his nose, sniffing it. Bigfoot 2 is furious. She points in the direction of Pete and Steve went. She stomps her feet. She grunts and makes angry noises and sounds. Bigfoot 1 gets in Bigfoot 2's face, also stomping and gesturing. They are clearly having a terrible argument. Bigfoot 3 intercedes, trying to make peace. He steps between 1 and 2, holding them by the shoulders. He holds out the honeycomb, offering it to 1 and 2. Bigfoot 2 turns up her nose. She is too upset to eat. Bigfoot 1 holds the comb and licks it. He grunts with pleasure. Bigfoot 2 slaps it out of his hand. She points in the direction of Pete and Steve and stomps and grunts and gestures some more. She is very upset. Bigfoot 1 picks up the honeycomb and shakes it at Bigfoot 2. He strides off stage, taking it with him. Bigfoot 3 pats 2's shoulders, trying to comfort her. She shrugs him off and strides off stage as well. Bigfoot 3 looks around, unsure what to do. Frustrated, he also exits. Lights dim. Next scene. Scene 6. Pete and Steve are in the hospital. Steve is on a stretcher with an IV hooked to his arm. A nurse enters, carrying a clipboard. She looks at Steve with sympathy.
How are you, little guy? Got stung by a bee, huh?
Steve moans.
Oh, poor kid.
She turns to Pete.
And you must be Pete Phillips, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we just need some additional information. On this form, you wrote your address as down past Elk Gulch?
Yeah.
Can you be more specific? We need to know for insurance billing purposes.
I ain't got no insurance.
I see.
Oh, don't worry. I'll pay. I got some money here.
Pete displays a coffee can, which he has brought with him.
Okay. Well, what is your relationship to Steve?
What do you mean?
Well, how are you related to him?
I don't understand.
Are you his father?
No. I ain't related to him. Well, can this wait? This kid's tired. He needs to get home.
And where's that home exactly?
I don't have to listen to this. You nosy-ass bureaucrats with your rules and your questions. You're going to drive me to drink. The kid got stung by a bee. You fixed him up. Now let me pay and go on home.
With all due respect, sir, I am deeply concerned about this boy. He is nonverbal, and he came in here dressed in nothing but a men's t-shirt.
So, he ain't talkative. So what? Seems like some people around here could learn a thing or two from him.
He has no shoes.
So what? So he ain't the most fashionable of kids. What's it to you?
How did you come to have custody of this child, Mr. Phillips?
Pete thinks, panicked. Then he yanks the IV out of Steve's arm, picks up the boy, and runs off stage.
Hey, come back here.
A doctor enters. He looks at the empty stretcher, confused.
Where's the patient?
This guy snatched him and ran off.
That's unusual.
Something's not right there.
Do you think it could be an abuse situation?
I don't know, but I think we need to try to find out.
Lights fade. End of scene. Scene 7. Pete and Steve are back home outside, chasing feral chickens.
Yeah, they used to live in that coop over there, but they got out and the damn things have gone feral. But that don't matter. They'll still taste good. We just got to catch them.
They scramble around the stage after the chickens. There's the sound of a car engine in the distance. Pete stops.
What the hell?
The engine stops. Evelyn Draper from off stage.
Mr. Phillips. Pete Phillips.
Evelyn Draper comes on stage. She is dressed for business in a suit and heels. She stumbles on the uneven ground in her unsuitable shoes. Her appearance scares the chickens away.
God damn it.
Evelyn Draper acts shocked as if she's never heard a curse word before. She's that kind of woman.
Are you Pete Phillips?
Yeah. And who are you? Besides the lady who scared away our dinner.
Mr. Phillips, my name is Evelyn Draper. I'm here on behalf of Child Protective Services. We understand that your boy here had a bit of an accident.
Yeah, he got stung by a bee. So what?
Yes, but I also understand that the child is nonverbal and was improperly dressed when he was brought into the hospital.
Proper? What the hell is proper anyway?
Sir, please don't be defensive. I'm merely here to check on the well-being of this child.
Evelyn Draper kneels down next to Steve, who is clearly afraid of this woman.
Honey, my name is Evelyn Draper. Can you understand what I am saying?
Steve cowers, running behind Pete's legs. Evelyn frowns and straightens up.
This type of needless fear is often a sign of abuse, Mr. Phillips. Now, I'm not accusing you of anything, but there are grave concerns about the welfare of this child.
There ain't nothing to be concerned about. Me and this boy, we're just fine and dandy. Now, why don't you go on and get out of here?
I can't until I've inspected the house.
What?
I need to ascertain whether or not his living conditions are safe and sanitary.
You saying I'm dirty?
I'm not saying anything, but I have a job to do here, and I'm not leaving until I do it.
The hell you are.
Mr. Phillips, if you refuse to let me perform my inspection, I'm within my rights to remove this child from the property.
Oh, that's just like a government agent, isn't it? Showing up here unannounced, doing whatever you like, and if I say boo about it, you'll snatch this innocent kid and throw him into some God-forsaken orphanage or form him out to a sweatshop or whatever you assholes do.
That is completely uncalled for.
No, you're completely uncalled for.
There was a thud as a dead chicken is hurled on stage. Everyone gapes at the bloodied chicken.
What the?
More chickens are hurled on stage, all of them aimed at Evelyn. The chickens are bloodied and torn. The feathers fly everywhere. Pete and Steve watch aghast. Evelyn screams and runs off stage, screaming as she goes.
This isn't over, Mr. Phillips. I will be back.
Pete turns to Steve.
Did you see that? What the?
Steve jumps and claps, excited. He runs off stage.
Steve, where are you going? Steve, get on back here.
Steve comes back on stage, holding hands with Bigfoot 2. Pete jumps, terrified. Then he gets a hold of himself.
Steve, let go of that thing and come here. Nice and slow.
Bigfoot 2 holds Steve close. Bigfoot 1 comes on stage. He sees Bigfoot 2 and Steve and gets angry. He rips Steve away from Bigfoot 2 and pushes the boy toward Pete.
I can't. I'm sorry. What the hell is happening?
Pete sits on the ground, mildly hyperventilating. He can't believe what he's seeing. Meanwhile, the Big Feet continue their fighting. Bigfoot 2 is holding tightly to Steve, who clings to her. Bigfoot 1 holds a dead chicken corpse and shakes it accusingly, making grunts and stomping. Bigfoot 3 comes on stage, again, trying to make peace. He kneels down next to Steve and gestures to Bigfoot 2, and then he gestures to Pete.
Oh, why is that thing pointing at me? What are you doing that for?
Steve is torn. He flings his arms at Bigfoot 2, and then he flings them at Pete. He rushes back to Pete and hugs him. Pete moved, hugs him back gingerly. Then Steve lets Pete go and hugs Bigfoot 2. He goes back to Pete, then back to Bigfoot 2. Bigfoot 3 grabs Steve and makes him hold still. It's clear that Steve can't make the choice. Pete has regained his composure now and he stands. He takes a few steps closer to the big feet.
Hey, I think I see what's going on here. You all the ones you were taking care of this kid, weren't you? You did a shit job, but I guess it's the best you could do being creatures like yourself.
Pete rubs his eyes and his forehead.
Oh, I'm sorry. I need another minute. Y'all are big feet, ain't you? Jesus H. Christ. Okay. I'm calm.
Pete shakes his head like he's clearing.
Now, I'm guessing it was hard on you raising a human kid with no idea what to do with it. So you sent him here. And you there, you want him back, ain't you? Ain't that right? I'm guessing you're a mama Bigfoot.
Pete goes to Steve and kneels down in front of him.
Hey there. Look, I didn't know you had a family. I didn't know. Shit, I didn't know anything. But I do know this. If you stay here, the authorities are going to come and take you away. That I'm sure of. And maybe that's the best thing for you. Maybe you'll get taken in by a nice family and you'll become a lawyer or a doctor or you get your shit together. But maybe you won't. Maybe you'll get caught up in the system and they'll beat you down so hard and low you can never get back to who you really are. So maybe you got to go back with them.
Pete gestures to the big feet. Bigfoot 2 clearly understands Pete's intent and she shows her happiness with some celebratory Bigfoot claps. Bigfoot 1 is less happy. He comes close to Pete and pokes him in the chest. He is bigger than Pete and Pete goes sprawling. Bigfoot 1 points at Steve and then at Pete. His intent is clear. Pete gets back up, brushing himself off.
He can't stay here. Look, I don't want him to go. He's a good little guy and a big help to me. But if he does, there's going to be trouble. I can't protect him no more. The government knows he's here. There's nothing more I can do for him.
Bigfoot 2 seems to understand and she approaches Pete. She extends a paw and pats him gently, gratefully. Pete is stiff and still while this happens. Bigfoot 1 continues gesturing and grunting again, pointing at Pete's cabin. Bigfoot 2 argues back. Pete knows what he has to do. He goes off stage into his cabin. He returns carrying a few jars of jam and his shotgun. Pete goes to Steve and hands him the jars of jam.
Here you go, buddy. It's been a pleasure having you stay.
Bigfoot 2 snatches one of the jars and looks at it suspiciously.
Bye, Steve. I'm fond of you.
With no further ado, Pete shoots his gun straight into the air. The sound frightens all the big feet and Steve, and they jump and they move away.
All right, y'all, get the fuck off my property before I lose my goddamn temper.
Pete shoots the gun a few more times, and Steve and the big feet run off stage. Pete looks around at the chicken carcasses. It is quiet. He sits down and he sets his gun beside him. He grabs one of the dead chickens and examines it. He holds it for a moment, and then he sobs. Lights out. Scene 8. Pete is alone, packing his things into boxes. He looks around.
10 years on this property, and I got to leave it all behind. Damn interfering government bureaucrats. Assholes.
He picks up a box and starts to carry it off stage. On his way, he trips over some jam jars. He stumbles and he sets the box down. He sees the jam jars and picks one of them up. It's full of pinkish red gunk.
What the?
He inspects the jar, turning it this way and that. Curious, he opens the lid and he takes a whiff. Immediately, he pulls back in disgust.
Oh, that's fish guts. That's fish guts.
He puts the lid back on and he looks around, hope on his face.
Steve? Steve? Are you there?
There's no answer.
Miss you, buddy. I sure do.
Pete clutches the sticky jar close to his chest. His eyes well up with tears, but when he speaks, his voice is gruff.
Thanks for returning the jars.
Pete puts the jars in the box he was carrying, lifts the box, and goes off stage. Curtain. The end.
Thank you for visiting the Orange County Playwrights Alliance's YouTube channel. Here you can find one-act and full-length plays by dramatists who have been produced around the country, so be sure to like and subscribe to get a first look at more new plays. If you'd like to learn more about us, visit our website, ocplaywrights.org, or our Facebook page, facebook.com/ocplaywrights.